Hey guys, hi. We're back with lesson 7, structure of the sun. Continue on. You'll notice on the page that you have, it starts with this kind of cool diagram that I selected, by the way. And we're going to talk about the sun and its structure, just like you've learned about like the Earth and its structure. The sun, we know about the structure of the sun through various satellites that we use to observe the sun. Okay. The first thing I want to make sure you understand is how the sun is powered. Okay, so for a lot of kids do struggle with this, and a lot of adults do too. The sun is not a fire. It's actually like a really kind of weird controlled explosion happening over and over and over. So the intense gravity is smashing these atoms close to its core and then making those atoms fuse together and they explode. We call this process nuclear fusion. It says the process that occurs when the nucleus of several atoms combine into one larger nucleus. So basically what's happening at the core there, the gravity is pushing these atoms together and fusing them together. When that happens, it releases a ton of energy, an explosion of energy. Okay, and this is what powers the sun. There's no like hidden amount of like firewood or something hidden in the back. It's not a fire. It's being created through nuclear fusion. Our sun is mostly turning the hydrogen into what we call helium gas. Okay, so let's jump into the structure of the sun, starting with the very center. And this one should not be that shocking to you. The center of the sun we call the core. Okay, so on your little diagram, write the core, and then over here on the side you have core as well. Now I'm going to be honest, there's a lot of sections on here. There's not a lot that we actually have to write in this unit, so yay, there's that good news. But what I do want to make sure that you understand, and on the slide it says the innermost layer of the sun where nuclear fusion happens in the source of the sun's light and heat and energy, light and heat energy. We are actually just going to copy that one completely verbatim, okay? So it says the innermost layer of the sun, the innermost layer of the sun where nuclear fusion happens, and it is the source of the sun's light and heat energy. Now, I'm going to be really honest with you. They love testing the core. Make sure you understand that. Okay, it's the one that's at the very center. It's where nuclear fusion happens, and this is where the sun's light and the sun's heat is being created. Okay, make sure you understand that one. That one's a really important layer. The next one is the radiative zone. Okay, honestly, now it has a lot of information. I'm going to read it here for you 1 second. It says, it is a shell of cooler hydrogen surrounding the solar core. Light is bouncing from the core through the radiative zone. Really, all I need you to know is that it's the largest section, largest layer. And just knowing that it takes light a long time to make it through this layer. That's why we call it the radiative zone. Not very much, I've never once seen them test that one, but I want to make sure you're aware of it. The next one, oh, I'm sorry, I should probably label it in the diagram. So for yours, it's going to be that next layer, radiative zone, radiative zone. Okay. The third layer exiting from that core is the convection zone, convection zone. Now I hope deep down inside your ears are like, oh my gosh, wait a minute, I know that word. Okay, now this one we do kind of talk about a little bit. This is where the heat and the light coming from the core is starting to warm the plasma that makes up the Earth and the sun, and as it reaches the edge here, it does cool off and it causes convection currents. Okay, remember convections are where we see those warm gases or warm water rising and cold gases sinking. So what I want us to draw, and if you have red or blue, please use those. But this is where we see a lot of convection happening. That warm plasma is rising and the cooler plasma is sinking back towards the core just to get heated up again. Okay, convection. So if you see those, an area with a whole bunch of arrows, that's a signature sign of convection happening. And here we go. So in the convection zone, this is where convection currents. And remember, convection currents are just where this warm gas or liquid is rising and sinking, okay? Where convection currents move warm plasma, because remember the sun is not a liquid, obviously, and it's not truly a gas. It's actually a gas ball of charged particles. We call that in science a plasma. Warm plasma and cooler plasma. It's like, I know maybe elementary school you remember like the sun is a gas. I mean, it's really highly energetically charged gas particles, and we call that specific state of matter plasma. Okay, so we got the core, then the radiative zone, then the convection zone. One of the things in this slide where it's talking about the core and the convection zone, when you look at pictures or videos of the surface of the sun, it looks kind of like the surface of like a boiling pot of water. And that is because these convection zones, just like in like a boiling pot of water, there's convection happening in a boiling pot of water, is creating this kind of like bubble texture almost on the very surface of the sun. And so what do we call the very surface of the sun? The actual physical layer, like if we could land something on the sun, what it would first actually physically touch is known as the photosphere. Photo means light, sphere, photosphere. And if I was to relate the structure of the sun to the structure of the earth, the photosphere is kind of like the crust of the sun. Okay, so photosphere. This is the outermost physical layer of the sun. Okay. So we have the core, then the radiative, then the convection zone, and then the photosphere, which is the outer edge of the sun. Well, then that begs the question, what are these other two areas here? Now, just like Earth has an atmosphere, the sun has an atmosphere. And the last two regions are the layers of the sun's atmosphere. The first one being what's known as the chromosphere. It's really close to the surface of the sun. It's the one that you have where there's like an arrow pointing to it. It looks like fire kind of coming from the edge of the sun. This is called the chromo, C-H-R-O-M-O sphere. Okay, chromosphere. This is the closest layer. This is the innermost layer of the sun's atmosphere. And anytime you've ever been in elementary school and you drew a picture of the sun, you probably did the whole like a circle with like all these lines coming out of it. Okay, the rays of the sun. Actually, what we call that part of the sun is called the corona. And I know everybody right now is like, oh my God, coronavirus. Corona is just the Latin word meaning crown. Ask anybody who speaks Spanish, what is the Spanish word for crown? It's corona. It means crown. And the reason being is that typically when we draw this shape, a circle of little lines coming out of it, it has a crown shape. The sun has a coronal shape to it. Guess what? The coronavirus also looks like a little circle with little spikes coming out. They share the same name. Okay, so it has nothing to do with COVID-19 or any of that nonsense. Just they share the same structure, and so they call it a corona. So what is the corona? It is the outer layer of the sun's atmosphere. Corona. The outermost layer of the sun's atmosphere. Okay, so I know this is like a whole bunch of information, and a lot of y'all are probably like panicking, like, oh my God, how am I supposed to memorize any of this? I'm going to ask. There are three that I typically like, hey, please make sure you can tell me something about these three layers. A, the core. They love testing the core. Expect to be tested on the core. Okay, this whole sentence, you know, where nuclear fusion happens, it's the source of the sun's light, and like all of that you've got to know. The next one I have seen them test is the photosphere. Make sure you understand that's the outer crust of the sun. Okay, it's the outermost physical layer. And then just knowing that the corona is the last layer, I guess, of the sun is kind of important. Those are the three that I'm like, make sure you know those three, okay? The core, the photosphere, and the corona. So I show you a picture of the sun's atmosphere. You can see the photosphere, again, looking kind of like bubbling water, just orange. And then in these other two pictures, you can see the chromosphere. It's this like red kind of like fire on the surface of the sun. And then way over here in this last picture, you can see the sun's rays. This is the corona as well. Okay, and then it gives you some practice problems. Okay, where does nuclear fusion take place? You should be able to clearly tell me that because we talked about it like 3 times. This question right here, which list below correctly lists the layers of the sun from the innermost to the outermost, okay? From the innermost to the outermost. Now, I'm not telling you that this is how a test question typically goes, but if you could just remember that the core is in the middle and the corona is on the outside, most of the time you can get this right. I've never seen them once move those two. And if you look at our answer choices, the only one that starts with the core and ends with the corona is the correct answer, okay? And that's all I have for lesson 7. We'll start lesson 8 tomorrow. Have a good day.